Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time is a review of the 1992 thriller, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Now, this is a film that when I first saw it, I actually liked it quite a bit. But something interesting happened on the most recent viewing of the film. I wasn't as impressed by it. There were certain elements of the film that I still really liked. Rebecca De Mornay, for one. Her performance as Peyton is phenomenal. She plays one of the best psychotic female characters in cinema, if you ask me. That's how great her performance is. And I still really liked Ernie Hudson's character in this because it was something you rarely see. I mean, you didn't really see a character who was mentally challenged like Solomon, who was portrayed in a way where it isn't a stereotype or it isn't offensive, and in a way that makes him out to be a hero. Like, that was honestly really nice to see, even today. So that is still a great element to this film, and something that still draws me to the film is the character of Solomon, played by Ernie Hudson. And Ernie Hudson's performance is also really good as the character, and it really showed his versatility as an actor, because he's not really known as a guy who can really stretch his acting muscles that much. A lot of people just see him as Winston from Ghostbusters, and I get it. It's a great role, and he does a great job playing that character. But this shows that he can do more than just play Winston. He or a action hero or something like that. He has more range than just the typical roles that he was given. And Curtis Hanson's direction is solid. I would say it's not some of his best, but I don't feel that he had that much to work with, so I don't think it's really his fault. I mean, there's only so much you can do with so many shots of a house. So, I don't think he really was a problem with the film. He did the best he could with what he had available. It's one of those things where he's like a master craftsman, but he didn't have the best materials to build the best possible house or the best possible foundation. So he just made do. He made do with what he had, and it wasn't the best material, but he tried as hard as he could to make it higher grade and higher quality. Keep in mind, folks, this is actually a really low budget film. This cost $11.7 million. Now, back in 1992, that's not a lot of money. And I know if you adjust it to inflation, it's a little bit more than that, but that's not a big budget film, especially for 1992. Might have been a bigger budgeted film for maybe the 80s, early 80s, mid 80s, but that's a pretty small budget for the early 90s. It's not a low budget. It's not a B movie budget or anything, but it's not a giant budget, and it shows. There's a lot of scenes in this that really look like something that you'd see out of a TV movie. And there's other stuff in it that is definitely theatrical. The greenhouse sequence, which a lot of people talk about for good reason, it looks like something that you would see in the theater. And it's one of the best scenes in the film. And that's another element of the movie that I still feel works really well. I also like Julianne Moore's character, Marlene. I also really love her performance in the film. I honestly wish she was in the movie more, because she's got that spunk and she's got that charisma that Annabella Sciorra is completely lacking. And honestly, I wish she was Claire, because if she was Claire, then there would be more of a legitimate battle between Peyton and Claire, because there really isn't one here. And the battle that happens at the end, it isn't that believable, because Claire, for the most part, is a neurotic wreck, and she's a wimp, and it's not believable at all that she finally kicks Peyton's ass. And even then, she doesn't really do that great of a job. It's up to Solomon to come in and save her. So then she can finally take out Peyton, because she tries to do it at first, but she gets her ass handed to her. And it's up to Solomon, the big strong man, to come in and save her. So it's one of those things where it's like, really? Like, this character sucks. And that's a big reason why the film isn't as great to me. It isn't as satisfying as I initially thought it was, because you have these characters that just aren't that effective, especially the lead characters. The family is boring. The family is bland. I mean, you have your typical sugary, sweet, cute daughter, Emma, played by Madeline Zima, and her performance is fine, but it's your typical cliched, sugary, sweet little girl who really is just there to be cute. And Annabelle Sciorra, apparently she auditioned for De Mornay's role, and I'm really glad that De Mornay got the role, because this film would be absolutely nothing. If you switch those roles and Sciorra was Peyton, this film would not work, because she doesn't have that type of ability in her. Like, you can tell. I mean, when she's trying to be tough at the end, it's not believable. So why would I ever believe for 1 second that she would be a legitimate psycho? I can't buy it. It just does not work. And De Mornay, she can play the type of role that Annabella did, because she had done it in films like Backdraft and so on and so forth. And honestly, De Mornay, she didn't really play that many crazy characters before this. So this was something that was out of her comfort zone. But she absolutely knocked it out of the park, and sadly, she became typecast because of this film. She was typecast before in her career for playing sexy characters because of her role in Risky Business, and then later on in her career, when she has her big breakout role in this film, she gets typecast as playing psychos. She gets typecast as playing sexy femme fatales. And that's really too bad, because she really is a very versatile actress. She can do all different types of stuff. So, and she's one of my favorite actresses, period. And this is definitely one of her best roles and one of her best films. And I definitely don't think it would work as well with anyone else in the role. Matt McCoy, he plays Michael Bartell, the husband of Claire. This is a nothing role. Apparently Kevin Spacey auditioned for this role and he didn't get it. And yeah, I think that's good, because I don't think he pulled it off. And I couldn't buy him as this type of character. And because he's more of an intense actor, and he's better at playing assholes. And that's because he's an asshole in real life. But Matt McCoy, he's pathetic. This character is pathetic. I mean, he does nothing. He tries to fight Peyton in the end. She kicks his ass with what seems like just a flick of the wrist. He falls off the stairs and breaks his legs. He's fucking useless. So, and I could see why they did it. They were trying to play with conventions. The husband is normally the guy who's strong, and in this instance, he's pretty weak. So, alright, that's fine. But Annabelle Sciorra's character is also weak. So this is a really big problem with this script by Amanda Silver, is that you have these two main characters who are having their family dynamic torn apart by Peyton, Rebecca De Mornay's character, and both of them are too similar to one another. There's no contrast, there's no dynamic. And so the fight between the family and de Mornay is just really lukewarm because you don't really have an equal foe. You don't have someone that could stand up to de Mornay believably. And honestly, I think they should have had a completely different approach to this story. I feel that the character of Claire should have been a really strong, headstrong, a really strong, confident mother who could hold her own, and showed that earlier in the film. Like maybe have some moment where there's like a burglar who comes in and she handles it and takes care of business and protects her family while her husband is unable to do so because he's a wimp. And then because of the mind games and the manipulation that's going on when Peyton comes in, that's when you have this strong character of Claire who is, as established earlier in the film, is tough and she can hold her own. She starts to doubt herself and she starts to become more wimpy and apathetic and is a shell of herself. She loses confidence in herself because of what's going on with Peyton. And then you have the character by Matt McCoy. He starts to he changes a little bit and becomes a little stronger, but at the same time, still not a match for Peyton. And then you'd have the climax where Claire would once again regain her strength and take out the threat and kick Peyton's ass. That would be a much better film to me. That would be a more interesting dynamic. It would be more exciting. It would be one of those things where the audience would be waiting for Claire to get her mojo back. Instead, you have this whole thing where you're waiting for this wimpy, asthmatic, sad, pathetic character in Claire, played by Annabella Sciorra, trying to show any backbone. And it's one of those things where, like, when she does show it, it's like you don't buy it because you spent the entire film being this complete pushover. So it's one of those things where I just really do feel that the characters should have been written completely differently, and I think that would have really enhanced the pacing and made the thriller legitimately thrilling all the way through instead of middlingly thrilling. I mean, that's a good way to put it. Like, this is a thriller that is like, it's thrilling at times, but it's not a nail-biting thriller by any means. I also don't think it helps that you already know de Mornay's motivation and everything early on. I think they should have maybe tried to keep that a little bit more under wraps. And if they didn't want to do that, if they wanted to go in that route where they don't, well, I mean, where they do show, where they let the audience know that it's revenge, then make her motivation stronger, because her motivation in this is weak. Her husband, we understand, is the love of her life, and he was one of the few people that understood her and her issues, but he's a sex offender. Okay, he was sexually assaulting his patients. And it's one of those things, it's like, yeah, even if you're a little bit crazy, I would think you would understand that, you know what, this guy was a fucking prick. But no. And I guess she blames Claire for her life falling apart because her sexually assaulting husband, who's played by John Delancey, a Q from Star Trek: The Next Generation, and it's a great casting choice because he plays a really good creep, and he actually kills himself. So she loses him, and then she loses her kid through a miscarriage. But I just don't understand why she goes straight to blaming Claire, and why she's like, oh, not really putting that much into the fact that her husband was a doctor, a gynecologist who was sexually assaulting his patients for years. You know, it's one of those things that's like, even if you're a little crazy, a little fucked in the head, I think you'd realize that was wrong, and you wouldn't feel that bad when he died or he killed himself, because you'd be like, wow, like what an asshole. But that's just my personal opinion. Then again, I don't have the same mindset as some people do. When it's their loved one, it's their husband. I get it, but I don't know. I just felt it was just her motivations were weak. It was just revenge for the sake of revenge. You killed my husband and you killed my baby. That's all it was. I really think that Amanda Silver could have done a better job with coming up with a much more interesting reason for Peyton to do what she would end up doing in the film. It just seemed like it was, let's just get this over with. It was like one of those things where it was an afterthought, the motivation for her plight and for her reign of terror. I will say this though about Amanda Silver's script: the dialogue, especially the scenes with Mornay when she's telling off the bullies at school and she's ruthless with Solomon and all of that, really great. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. That's a really great quote. The moment where it's really terrifying, where she's talking about, this is my family now. You're not going to take away my family. That's really good. And I like that whole idea. The whole idea of a nanny who has ulterior motives, who wants to take over your family. That's honestly pretty terrifying, and I could see why a lot of audiences in 1992 really related to that, or it really resonated with them, because it hit close to home, especially if you have a family. You're like, oh my god, like it really made you think twice about nannies. It's like this movie was to nannies as Jaws was to sharks. It's one of those things where people were afraid to go in the water because of Jaws, and people were afraid to hire nannies because of The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Now, and it didn't help either that Annabella Sciorra's character, like Claire, really didn't do that much research on De Mornay's character. She shows up, seems to be this perfect angel, and she doesn't really do that much background research, just listens to all of her claims and is like, all right, you're our nanny. It was like, okay, all right. So that's another aspect of the script that sucks, because it's rather implausible. Like, you didn't want it. She went through all these different nannies, couldn't find the right one. She was already leery of hiring a nanny, and then De Mornay's character shows up just because she stopped the school bus so Annabelle Sciorra's character Claire could give her daughter her jacket, and was like a really nice lady and said all the right things. That was enough for her to hire her. It's one of those things that's like, you were leery about it, but now you're like, oh, no, hey, this is the perfect nanny. I don't need to do any background checks or anything. I mean, even The Guardian, the 1990 film, which actually came out before this, that did more. That thought through things better. And honestly, I like that film more than The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. I'm surprised people weren't terrified of hiring nannies after watching that. And I think the reason why they weren't is because, hey, druid wood nymphs are not reality. They're not something that you're going to see every day. A crazy, vindictive, psychotic nanny, that's a possibility. Still a distinct possibility, but who knows, you know? It's still more realistic and believable and plausible than a wood nymph. But, yeah, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. I'm trying to think of other things I want to say about the film. Oh, I definitely want to mention the score by Graham Revell. I really love the opening theme, which is actually a rendition of a classical piece of music. It's yeah, it's called Poor Wandering Wrong. Fuck. Apparently I can't say this word. This is a tongue twister for me. Poor Wandering One, and poor fucking tongue, and poor audience for having to listen to me fuck up that many times. I'm sorry. It's actually from the Pirates of Penzance. So, yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. I really love that piece of music. And apparently Sybil Shepherd, she turned down the lead role of Peyton Flanders, citing her feminist beliefs. I'm glad she turned it down because I don't really see her pulling that off very well. And Christopher McDonald turned down the part of Michael. I can't see Shooter McGavin in that role either. Like he's just like Kevin Spacey. He's too good at playing assholes. I wouldn't buy him as this sappy, sad sack of a husband. The other technical aspects of the production, they're fine. The cinematography by Robert Elswit, the editing by John F. Link. The running time is 110 minutes. It's 10 minutes away from being 2 hours, and it does not need to be that long. There are quite a few moments that just feel like it's going through the motions, and so on and so forth. And overall, like I said, it's worth a watch for de Mornay, and her performance is a powerhouse, and it's very memorable, and it's intense. But the other aspects of the film are nowhere near as strong. So it's one of those movies where it's maintains your interest when de Mornay's on the screen, but when she's off the screen, or she's not doing that much, or she's not doing anything crazy, it tails off, and it just becomes background noise. So that's why it's ultimately a time waster for me. That's why I just feel it's an okay film. I don't really know what else to say about the movie, except if I were to rate it out of 5 stars, I give it 3 out of 5. I mean, the movie was popular. It made $88 million in the box office when it came out, which is a considerable profit for 1992. If you adjust it to inflation, it's even more profit. It only cost $11 million to make, so it made a lot of money, and it did leave a mark on popular culture. And when people mention this film, a lot of people remember it and know of it. But it's one of those movies that I don't feel it holds up. I don't feel it's as good as its reputation suggests that it is. And it's a shame because de Mornay, she really is so great in this. I just wish that everything else around it was on the same level. Like I said, I like Ernie Hudson. I like the score. Curtis Hanson's direction is solid. It's not an issue. I just feel the script was substandard. I thought it was below par. I thought it was not as good as it could have been. And that's ultimately why the film is not as terrific as of a thriller as I initially thought it was. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. For those of you that love the film and think it's one of the best thrillers that you've personally seen, have no problem with that. In fact, I can understand why a lot of people really love this film. But it just didn't resonate with me as much this most recent time around. And yeah, I also kind of didn't really find that much to say about it either. So it's one of those films that, other than de Mornay and a few other elements, it's just not a classic to me. But that's just me personally. So anyway, thank you for watching my review of The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. And as always, I will see you later. See ya.